Welcome everybody to another episode of Covid Convos. Got our friends again, Kesh and Griggsy, joining us as usual. Hey guys.
Hey man, how you going?
G'day Simon, awesome to be here mate.
Yeah, good to see you guys. We've also got a special guest tonight, Carsten Grimm. I was going to say all the way from New Zealand, but it's not that far away for us here in Australia. But how are you, Carsten?
Great, thanks Simon. Thanks for having me on. Good to see you guys. Kesh, Griggsy, good to be here.
Thanks for coming in, mate. It's great to see your face and looking forward to a good convo tonight. Just for people out there listening, Carsten, would you be able to just give us a little rundown on your background and interests?
Yeah, sure. So I guess for me, as we've sort of previously talked about, you and Kesh and I, so my background's in psychology. That's my most recent career, but I didn't start out there. So my first career was in aviation. I'd sort of grown up watching this little piece of art house cinema that no one would have heard of, Top Gun, and so I wanted to fly, and so that's what I did. I did that for 12.5 years. And through that, got really interested in mental skills and positive psychology and high performance and that kind of stuff. So I studied and decided to push all my chips into psychology. So I left aviation, retrained, became a psychologist. And so now I'm supporting high performers and pilots and first responders. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I love what I do. I'm passionate about it. I mean, you guys have heard me talk about this at length in the past. So I feel like I've found my calling and I'm really aligned with what I do.
That's excellent, mate. I definitely, when I've spoken to you about it, I get that sense for sure. So, as I mentioned, you're over in New Zealand. We haven't had anyone on the show from New Zealand before, and we usually just ask people how things are going in your local area and yeah, what's been changing recently. Can you just explain to us what you're seeing and feeling over there?
Yeah, well, there's a bit on. So I guess every country's sort of response is a little bit different, but ours has really escalated really quickly. So the government's announced, like maybe it was as recently as 24 hours ago, that we're going into full lockdown, and that kicks off at midnight tonight. So fully restricted movements, only leaving the house basically if you need to get essential sort of items, groceries, medical supplies, otherwise staying at home. So we've been working from home pretty much all this week, and now we're going into full lockdown. So so a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty. I would say panic, but not so much. I'm not sensing that so much out of the sort of the New Zealand response. We're getting a lot of messaging from official channels, be kind to one another. We're in this together, we're going to get through it. And I think that's really done a lot actually to sort of set the tone. So there has been a lot of uncertainty, but I think the messaging has been appropriate, and I think a lot of Kiwis are certainly feeling like the response is the right one, the appropriate one. And as I say, we're staying in. That's it. So we're in lockdown from midnight tonight.
Mm. Wow, that sounds like it's all happening. Like in most things, mate, we find New Zealand follows Australia or lags behind Australia a bit. But what are the stats over there in terms of number of cases and that sort of thing? Is it? I must confess, I haven't been following New Zealand compared to US and Europe and that sort of thing. But yeah, where's it up to?
Well, I guess maybe it follows a similar pattern to other countries. Most of our cases have been from arrivals from overseas, being island nations. So we've just clocked over 200 cases, but of course it's following the same kind of exponential doubling pattern. And I mean, we could all see with this, of course, sort of seeing what's happened in Europe. And so the government's messaging has been go hard, go early, is why they've really escalated the isolation response. So 200 cases, we've also heard we've had about sort of somewhere between 15 to 20 people recover, which I think is a really important part of the messaging and positive framing of this whole experience.
Carsten, I was just interested, mate, how your work's being affected by I guess the situation so far. So obviously working with in psychology and high performance, I'm guessing that a huge part of it is that face-to-face developing relationships. How have you seen it so far?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things to say about that, Grigsy. So the first one is that a lot of the people that I'm working with and supporting, so that in the sort of the first responder kind of area, they've just been redeployed, as you can imagine, into supporting the community, right? So there's been a lot of uncertainty there. They've had to re-roll what they do. All training's been cancelled, right? As you'd expect, it's appropriate, and now they're sort of being redeployed to support the community response. So that's the first thing to say is, of course, who's not affected? I mean, everyone's affected in different ways. I've certainly seen that in the work that the people that I support, their work's really changed quite quickly. In terms of my work, so I mean, like probably the world over, you know, we've moved to this remote sort of support, a remote working arrangement, right? So, and I'll have to say, in some ways, that's been really positive, I think, because in some ways, because what that has essentially forced us to do is examine some of our practices and how we support our people, and allowed us to sort of explore other ways of how we can support from afar, how we can use, you know, Zoom like we're doing here in this conversation, and how we can be a lot more flexible around meeting people where they're at with whatever's going on, and we don't have to be there in the same room. So that's how we're sort of seeing, and it's unfolding, right? It's unfolding. We're all sort of just experiencing it's emergent. But in that regard, we're definitely sort of seeing a move towards way more flexibility in our work practices.
I feel like it's really brought forward this move to online learning and you know, conversations like this over whatever platform you're using, but you know, online meetings and all that we've been talking about for a long time, have been coming for a long time, but this is almost like pushed us off the cliff and jumped in the deep end, if you like. It all seems to be working pretty well, but I'm also interested to see when we hopefully come out the other side of this, how much of it sticks, I suppose, and how many of those things like you were just referring to, Carsten, actually keep going, or whether we just revert back to the old 9 to 5 into the office. And
yeah, I've been sort of thinking out loud around some of those themes myself, Simon. A couple of things I'd probably say to that. I think one is, I think crises like this often sort of test systems and sort of expose where systems are out of balance, right? And that can be in like big ways and in small ways. So, you know, macro system, economic systems, but even in the micro, you know, like in the family system, where are things out of balance? You know, are we resilient to weather things like this? And personally too, like where am I personally out of balance? How have I been living out of balance? You know, where am I stressed out? Potentially I haven't been. So I think there's plenty of that going down at the moment. And the other thing I'd say was around the opportunity to examine our values, you know. So one of the modalities I use is, right, you know, you've heard me talk about it in the past, Kesha, Simon, acceptance commitment therapy. A big part of that is examining your values and hitting pause, taking a look at the things that are most important. Of course, we've seen plenty of themes around that lately, around, you know, selfing and having this opportunity in isolation to maybe focus on things that really matter, family, etc. But I think if we do that, I think we do stand an opportunity. There is an opportunity for us to really consolidate and examine what's most important. And my hope, anyway, so I'm being a humanist and maybe a little bit naive, but an optimist at centre, is that stuff will stick.
Want to dig in, Carsten, because it's a recurring theme, and I think a really important one, that this disruption is bringing a lot of our expectations and assumptions surface level. Everything that we consider implicit under the surface, we're having to reconsider. And this concept of, like, you know, digging, that's an opportunity to dig into what's important. I would love to know more about how, you know, what are some of the things that, you know, you've been using or you've used in the past that can help people do that? You know, we talk a lot about it, opportunity here, but yeah, how do you take that?
Yeah, great, because it's one thing to sit around here and just riff on it, but how do you put it into practice in your life? So a couple of ways that respond, again, micro and macro. So you know, if we just think about what we're up for here in New Zealand, Australia, and elsewhere in the world, you know, 4 weeks of isolation at home. One thing we can do is examine, okay, well, what's best case? How would we weather this best? You know, if this isolation period went as well as it possibly could, you know, what would things be like for my family, me, my health, well-being, and other things after 4 weeks, right? So you can dig into that. I've got some other sort of things that might be useful around that. A little bit longer term around the values, well, there's plenty of values exercises that can help you identify what's most important. You know, thinking ahead, you know, if you were to sort of be an observer at your sort of 80th birthday and lots of people are saying nice things about you, like what would you in your heart of hearts really want people to be saying about you? How you lived your life and what you committed to and what you stood for and what you spent your time on, what you spent your resources on. You know, that stuff can really help you surface actually what you might not be paying a lot of attention to, because we're all so busy scrolling and running from one thing to another, right? So here's again, opportunity, humanity, bereavements, all that kind of stuff acknowledged, right? But here is this kind of tentative silver lining for us to really sort of take a knee and maybe do some of that deeper inner work.
Carsten, just interested to hear whether you've had to reassess any of those assumptions or values yourself in the last week or two.
You want to know, Griggsy, what's funny about this for me personally? Off this period of sabbatical over Christmas, New Year's, and I've just been in this, you know, really fortunate position to be able to take a little bit of extra time and do some of that work. And what that really exposed for me was some of these themes I think a lot of us have been confronted with around living more simply and connection to family. And another thing actually for me that I'd sort of rediscovered in me was this kind of, sounds funny to say it, but this real desire, longing for something deeper and spiritual, like a spiritual value that I hadn't really been honouring the way that I was sort of living my life in the last few years. So I'd been really reconnecting with that stuff right before this all went down, and so I feel like that is a great foundation for me to go into this uncertainty, because I feel like I've actually done some of that work recently, right? Just by virtue of the comedy of timing. Hey, you know, I just happened to be able to have some of this. And now that's playing out, you know. So I've got my 2 older stepdaughters staying with us and their partners. So, you know, we've got a full house, but families here, we're all in isolation together, and we can really sort of recommit to some of that family stuff. And I think that, you know, there was an opportunity for us to not do that, you know, like we could have stayed here, my wife and our 5-year-old, and the girls could have stayed away. But I think because those values were so salient to me, I was like, no, listen, let's make the move and let's get everyone together and let's be under one roof.
Carsten is touching on definitely an interest area as well, values and living by your values, and I always thought that I lived up to that. But I suppose I've been also reassessing things a little bit in my life and trying to get a bit more clear about what I actually mean when I talk about my values, and then living by them, which is a whole another thing. And it can actually be quite hard and not feel great in the moment. Sort of like, you know, I think there's an analogy around, you know, maybe going to the gym and working out. You know, it's the right thing to do, but it's hard work. But after doing it for a while, you start to feel better and it gets a bit easier. But really, to be honest, if you're after the easiest thing, you just probably sit on the couch and watch telly.
We're not experiencing that discomfort for no reason. Like we're experiencing that, we're being willing to have that slightly uncomfortable experience in the service of something that's important to us, right? So, and whatever's, you know, worthwhile to us, there's going to be some kind of effort or sacrifice or discomfort that might need to be made, you know, some kind of self-disciplining or something, right? So that willingness to tolerate some of that discomfort in the service of something greater, I think that's a really key component. And I think your gym analogy, Mac, that is a really good one. I think like strengthening that muscle, right, of willingness to experience that in the service of something that's more important. I think though, and for me, certainly in my life, I think it's been greatly helped by having a clearer true north, right? Because if you don't know why you're working out, right, and then you come up against a hard set, well, you might just be a little bit more inclined to flag it and walk away. But if you've got a very clear sense of direction, right, that's a resource, that's an inner resource that can be cultivated, a muscle that can be strengthened, right, and that can help you in those moments.
I think that's great advice, Carsten. I'm probably going to walk away from this episode and have a good think about my life for the next 24 hours, or maybe a bit longer. I'm interested, just you touched on the idea of strengthening a muscle, and I know that you're interested particularly in mindfulness, and I'm guessing that that's one mechanism to strengthen that muscle. As somebody who's just sort of still very, I guess, fresh to mindfulness, what would be your recommendations to people, myself included, on how they might use it in the current situations to strengthen that muscle?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think the first thing I'd say is, I think in a time like this, the smartest thing you can do in terms of your mindfulness practice is approach it with a healthy dose of self-compassion, right? Because there's a lot on, and there's going to be a lot on your mind, and you're probably outside of your normal routine, right? And so sitting on your cushion, it's a great practice, and I totally recommend it to everyone, but it may be that your mind is very busy right now. And so a healthy dose of self-compassion around your experiences is probably a good place to start. It is something that just takes time, right? And it is that gym analogy, right? But what it can do is it can help you, with a relaxation response, which is great at a time like this. But over time, it can really help you to identify, you know, the narratives, the stuff that's playing in your mind on loop, right? And it can just open up a little window, just a tiny little window at first. You can get a little bit more visibility on that, and allow you to unhook from some of that stuff, right? That might be derailing your behavior, right? But it does not have to be formally on the cushion, right, with a timer. It might just be a couple of times sprinkled throughout your day, what they call informal mindfulness, right? When you're washing your hands, right? When you're preparing a meal, when you're having a glass of water. Just little micro moments of checking in with yourself, right? That sprinkled throughout the day, that can be like getting just a few extra reps, you know, on your mindfulness practice, right? And if you can remember to do it, awesome. If you can't, see point A around self-compassion.
I want to jump in there. Love that advice, Carsten. And I want to share actually something that we've been doing as well. Because like you said, it doesn't have to be on the cushion. But one of the things the Covid Convos has been practicing throughout this process is before jumping onto our chats, we take a moment of mindfulness with each other, just to arrive, ground, take a moment to check in with ourselves, and be able to enter a new space a little bit fresher. And I guess all of us are entering so many different online spaces now. It's just a simple thing that can make the difference. Like I notice when I'm bumped from one Zoom call to the next, to the next, to the next, it's so draining. But just that small practice of taking a moment, gathering yourself, maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes of mindfulness just changes the whole experience.
Yeah, 100%. And would it be okay if I just took us through a real brief sort of 30-second mindfulness sort of exercise that I find really useful and that other people might find really useful just as a tool?
Yeah, man, 100%.
Cool. It's from ACT, and I think Russ Harris is the one who came up with it. It's just called Dropping Anchor. Dropping Anchor, and it just follows this format, ACE, ACE, and the first part is just acknowledging, you know, here we are and we're having this experience, and we're just acknowledging whatever thoughts are going through our mind right now, whatever chatterbox mind is going on, acknowledging that, acknowledging whatever emotional tone is in our experience right now, any anxiety, sense of uncertainty, acknowledging that, right? So that's the A part. And the C part It's just connecting back with the body, right? So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just connecting with whatever sensations you can feel. That might be as simple as feeling the weight of the body in the chair, your hands on the legs. You might like to have a stretch, roll the shoulders, right? Take a deep breath, just connecting back with the body. And the last part, E, is engaging with the outside world. So just looking around wherever you are, just pointing out or noticing 4 or 5 things that you can see in the room, right? And then engaging with whatever you're doing. So here we are, we're having this conversation. So very simple way of dropping anchor. So acknowledging whatever's going on, connecting back in the body and engaging with the outside world. And, you know, dropping anchor in a storm doesn't make the storm go away, right? The storm's going to be there, but it's just a place where you can just center yourself and hold on and allow that storm to pass.
Love it. Thanks, Carsten. Leads me, I suppose, to the next question, which was around what I'm aware there's lots of resources and apps and those sort of things, whether it's Smiling Mind or Headspace, or there's probably another 100 or 1,000 of them. But have you got any tips for people out there if they want to, I suppose, particularly start a bit of a mindfulness practice? Is there any resources in particular, whether it be app or book or whatever, that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no wrong door, right? I think what's most important is you find something that you like, right, and that you can turn into a habit. You know, I mean, the usual suspects, I always advocate for people, your standard sort of Headspace. They're offering a free section in their app at the moment called Weathering the Storm, with a bunch of really useful resources there. Quite like also Dan Harris's app, 10% Happier. They've got a section called, I think, the Coronavirus Sanity Guide, with a bunch of free resources there. And Sam Harris's app, Waking Up, I believe, has got a bunch of resources there as well. And often, you know, I'm sort of seeing these apps are offering at least sort of part of their services for free, part of their content for free in response to this. So no wrong door. Find one that you like, find a time in the day that works for you, and just slowly but surely chip away at that habit building stuff. Yeah,
great. No excuse not to give it a try now if people aren't already. But well, actually, further to that, a lot of good reasons to try out mindfulness if you haven't already. Unfortunately, Carsten, we've come to pretty much the end of our time. Thanks again for everything tonight. But is there one last opportunity, I suppose, to raise anything or get any message out to people listening in that you feel is important, or you want to get off your chest that haven't had the chance to already tonight?
I guess just one parting story from a colleague that I work with. I'm lucky enough to work with some chaplains, padres in my line of business, and one of them was sharing he'd been in touch with another padre, a colleague of his, somewhere in Asia, I think Hong Kong, but I could be mistaken, who had gone through the SARS crisis. And he asked, "Oh, do you have any advice for us here in New Zealand based on your experience?" And he said, "Yes, 3 pieces of advice. The first one is look after yourself. And the second one is look after yourself. And the third one is look after yourself." So my parting words there is very much C.A, self-compassion, and take good care of yourself at a time like this.
Gold. Love it. Thanks again, Carsten. It's been great, mate. Really enjoyed it. I know I speak for the other guys as well. Really appreciate you making the time in what is definitely a busy time and quite hectic, I'm sure, for you.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, guys. And everybody, stay safe out there.
So that's it for another Covid Convo, everybody. Just another reminder to please share, like and subscribe if you've gotten anything out of the session tonight and you think other people might. Please spread the word. And that's it for us. So you stay healthy, world.